and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side.
President Donald Trump is once again saying there is blame on both sides in last weekend's deadly violence in Virginia. Could it happen here? A new report finds California is home to more hate groups than any other state in the nation.
You cannot have an untrained person taking care of a multi-million-dollar asset.
And the jobs are there, but the skills are not. We take a look at the manufacturing paradox in America. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. President Donald Trump is once again saying there is blame on both sides for last weekend's deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's a change from his message yesterday when he condemned white supremacists. Today, he said some of the facts about the violence is still not known.
What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
Some San Diego lawmakers took to Twitter to respond to Trump's statements. Democratic Congresswoman Susan Davis asked, is there no limit to President Trump's ability to throw more insults and stoke fears on a tragic and defining event? And Republican Congressman Darrell Issa tweeted, we should be abundantly clear. White supremacy, Nazism, and hate have no place in our society. We must condemn it on no uncertain terms. California is home to 79 hate groups, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's more than any other state in the nation. Tonight, San Diegans are holding an event to proclaim hate has no home here. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy has a story.
The Anti-Defamation League of San Diego here in Murphy Canyon is leading tonight's event. They say the white supremacy groups that marched with torches carrying Nazi and Confederate flags through the streets of Charlottesville was not an isolated incident, but rather a growing movement, including here in San Diego.
I liken it to somebody taking the lid off of the sewer, and so it's always been there, this hate just under the surface. But now that lid has been removed and it's all bubbled up. And what do we as a country do with it now?
Tammy Gillies is the regional director of the Anti-Defamation League. She says the violence in Charlottesville was disheartening and tragic, but not surprising. She says they were expecting it.
We had done an analysis that this was going to be probably the largest rally that had occurred in the past decade. So we knew it was going to be happening, but knowing it and actually seeing it happen, so it is a little bit heartbreaking.
She says these hate groups are building momentum and feeling emboldened by divisive political rhetoric. They're recruiting through the internet and on college campuses.
Last year we had a group, Identity Europa, that was here at San Diego State recruiting. And we're seeing it all over the country. But again, we don't think of it, or most people don't think of it happening here in Southern California.
She says California, particularly Southern California, has the largest number of white supremacists in the country. She says that demands action. It's one reason she's leading a discussion tonight at the Jewish Community Center.
Just for words of inspiration and a call to action on what we can do about this growing movement in our country.
Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
The event takes place at 7 tonight at the Jewish Community Center in La Jolla. It's open to the public. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says today that Affordable Care Act premiums could soar if the Trump administration ends Obamacare subsidies. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says the change could cause premiums in California to go up even higher.
Covered California premiums are already going up 12% next year. They could increase an additional 12%. if President Trump terminates cost-sharing reduction payments, also known as CSRs. These federal subsidies help reduce low-income consumers' out-of-pocket costs. Carmen Balber heads up the nonprofit Consumer Watchdog. She says if CSRs are discontinued, most of the rate hikes will be covered by increased tax credits for those who qualify.
But those consumers who do not receive subsidies will get the double whammy because they're already not receiving subsidies. Now they'll be paying an extra 12% premium increase on top of their existing premiums.
The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates that cutting off the payments would add $194 billion to the federal deficit. Even so, President Trump has threatened to kill CSRs as a means to force Democrats to agree to change the Affordable Care Act. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Veterans could get extended benefits. President Donald Trump is expected to sign the GI Forever bill, recently passed by Congress. The bill was co-sponsored by Representative Scott Peters of San Diego. Today, he announced the new benefits in La Jolla. Ahead of that announcement, I sat down with him to talk about what the GI Forever bill would mean for San Diego service members and more.
This effort was to update the GI Bill for post 9/11 vets. So it does a few things. One is it eliminates the use it or lose it rule. You used to have to use your GI benefits within 15 years. We discovered a lot of people wanted to be parents and then thought later about going back to school, so this removes that limit. For Purple Heart recipients, it takes this 36-month limit for service. You have to be in for 36 months. We found that some Purple Heart recipients were not making the 36 months because they were injured on the field of battle, and then they wouldn't get their full GI benefits. We closed that loophole so that if you are injured in the field of battle, you've met the service requirements. And then we're trying to make sure that reservists who are called into duty get treated on par with the active duty people next to whom they fight.
And here in San Diego, there's a lot of interest in the proposed border wall.
A wall is just not the most cost-effective way to secure the border. I think any border policy should have security in it. But really what we should be focusing on is the trade that's coming across the gates. And, you know, we know that 98% of the cargo that comes through from San Ysidro, for instance, is legitimate, is job-creating. But there's that 1% that we need to apprehend. That's where we ought to be focusing, not on building some wall that's going to both destroy economy, destroy the environment, and waste a lot of resources. $20 billion for a wall is just not the way to spend our infrastructure money. We just don't have all the money in the world.
San Diegans on Sunday, hundreds came out for a vigil to support the victims of Charlottesville. Can you talk about what more can San Diegans do to fight against the hateful rhetoric that some people feel has become normalized?
I said to that crowd, 1,000 people, that the American democracy is an experiment. We call it the American experiment. The reason is because it's never finished. The fight for democracy, the fight for freedom, the fight for equality is ongoing. And things have gotten better, but we were reminded this weekend that there's still a lot of ugliness and racism and hatred out there. We have to stand up against it. And we have to turn the hearts of people, which we can't do with just anger. We have to do that with love. And I think that's what Martin Luther King told us. That's what Nelson Mandela told us. That's what Barack Obama has reminded us. And, you know, we still have a lot of work to do. So I said, be present, be aware, be engaged, and be woke. We'll fight this battle at the ballot box, in the courtroom, person to person, in the news media, wherever we have to. But let's all react to it in the right way. And I think the president let us down, but a lot of elected officials, a lot of elected leaders across the country have expressed the appropriate outrage and objection to this.
And speaking of inclusiveness, there was a lot of outrage and concern and confusion about the president's announcement to ban transgender people from service. What's your reaction to that, and what's the likelihood that that would actually happen?
I can't think of anything more backward than telling America's patriots that you can't serve your country in battle because of your gender identity. That's just not the way we do things. We give those people those positions on merit and on their drive and determination. And we have a merit-based military, a volunteer military, and we should welcome those people, not reject them, if they're willing to serve.
What do you plan to tackle when you get back?
Well, I mean, we have to fight the bad stuff. I think that's, clearly if they're going to bring us a tax reform proposal that's just about cutting taxes for people who don't need tax cuts, it won't stimulate the economy, we'll say no to that. But what I prefer to do, and I'm always open to do, and I've made I've outreached personally to my friends on the Republican side, is that, hey, if you want to work on this together, I think we can come to an agreement. And that's what I'll continue to do. Again, on the Veterans Bill, a huge success for updating the GI with the Forever GI Bill. We got a lot of work to do on health care, but on tax reform, for instance, there's a lot of agreement that we need to update the tax code to make American businesses and employees more competitive. Let's work together on that. That's my approach. It'll continue to be as long as I'm in Congress.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Peters is back home in San Diego for the August recess. KPBS has invited all 5 members of the San Diego congressional delegation to join us here on Evening Edition. We'll bring you those interviews in the coming weeks. The man who heads the San Diego Association of Governments wants to quit his job by Friday. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says the embattled Gary Gallegos has been under pressure to leave.
A week and a half ago, SANDAG board members heard the results of an investigation into the Transportation Agency's revenue forecasting scandal. For years, officials had been overestimating how much money they would be collecting in sales tax revenues. And when that scandal became public, SANDAG sought to delete and hide documents from the public. The investigation calls out Gallegos specifically for poor judgment and making statements that were, quote, insufficiently transparent. Gallegos announced last week that he plans to retire by the end of the year. But on Monday, he told the SANDAG Executive Committee he wants to leave by the end of this week. He needs special permission because his contract requires 4 months' notice before quitting. SANDAG board member and Encinitas Mayor Catherine Blakespear says she hopes the committee lets Gallegos go on Friday.
Really what's being discussed is whether it happens immediately or we drag this on. And my preference would be not to drag it on. The sooner the better, because we need to rebuild credibility with the public and with the board members. And we'd like to move forward and put this behind us.
Whenever Gallegos leaves his job, it's up to the board to find a replacement. That search is expected to span the country. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Modifying insects may be the key to stop the spread of diseases like Zika and malaria. This is what scientists, including a team at UC San Diego, are working to find out. The idea is one day these altered bugs could be released in the wild to improve public health. But KPBS science reporter David Wagner says a new study finds some Americans strongly oppose such plans.
Recently, a biotech company sought to test its genetically engineered insects in Florida in an effort to fight mosquito-borne diseases. UC San Diego researcher Cinnamon Bloss wanted to know what members of the American public thought of this plan. So for a new study out this week, she analyzed comments from people with strong enough opinions to write into the FDA regarding the proposed test.
These are people motivated to get online and respond to, a federal document. And so perhaps unsurprisingly, we found about 3/4 of them were generally opposed to doing this.
Bloss notes that these may have only been the loudest voices in the room, but she says it's important for scientists to engage with the concerns of community members before hatching plans to test genetically modified bugs in their backyards.
I actually think it's really important to start doing some of this work in a state like California where, we haven't seen the outbreak yet, but it's certainly possible that something like that could happen in the future.
UC San Diego biologist Ethan Beer has received federal funding to explore the possibility of using genetic tools to fight mosquito-borne diseases in California. He and his colleagues have already shown that it's possible to spread malaria-resistant genes through mosquito populations using a genetic chain reaction called gene drive. Beer said Bloss's new study is a very important analysis of what went wrong in Florida, and he hopes the lessons learned will inform future attempts to engage the public. David Wagner, KPBS News.
A wet winter followed by a severely hot summer turns out to be a bad combination for California avocados. A production shortfall is sending output down and prices up. California farmers expect to harvest 215 million pounds of avocado this year, a little more than half as much as last year. Months after President Trump promised to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., many plant operators say they're struggling to fill positions. Associated Press reporter Mike Householder explains why.
The workers of today are using the machines of tomorrow.
I can't find.
But that's little consolation to Herbie Mays.
It will.
The 62-year-old from near Cincinnati lost his job after 30 years when his company moves from production to Mexico.
I've been fighting to figure out what the best thing to do and haven't came up with no answer.
Nearby, GE Aviation is looking for workers to man machines that make jet engine parts. But Mays doesn't have the needed skills.
I really don't know what to do right now.
They forgot that it was the American worker who truly built our country.
This is the paradox of American manufacturing in 2017. Donald Trump won the presidency in part because he pledged to stop jobs going overseas.
The Rust Belt has been hammered.
But American manufacturers have actually added nearly 1 million jobs in the past 7 years. The problem is those jobs require specialized skills.
You cannot have an untrained person taking care of a multi-million-dollar asset.
Festo is doing more than looking for workers, it's training them. The company needs employees at its Ohio facility who can monitor a robotic distribution system. So it launched 2-year college apprenticeship programs, which combine engineering and computer skills.
We need the smart, intelligent young students that's coming out of these schools.
Students like 18-year-old Jalen Britton.
A lot of people say the robotics, they're going to take over the human jobs, but really the robots, they're going to enhance what we're already doing. So if you evolve with the robots that are evolving, we grow with whatever is growing.
A.J. Sherman is in the final year of a 4-year apprenticeship at this steel factory in Virginia. Here, humans and robots work side by side, making chainsaws, leaf blowers, and weed trimmers.
When I tell someone I'm an apprentice, the first thing they ask is, do you make money? And the answer is obviously yes, we make great money.
Of the 146 million jobs in the U.S., less than half of 1% were filled by active apprentices last year. Apprenticeships are far more common in European countries like Denmark. Novozymes, which makes enzymes for detergents, says automation has increased employment.
We have more jobs altogether in Denmark than we had 15 years ago.
Herbie Mays knows he may have to learn new skills. But he also needs work now to supplement his benefits. Mike Householder, Associated Press, Norwood, Ohio.
What does an elephant have to do with the economy and globalization? A marketplace correspondent, Scott Tong, explains.
What is globalization? We're talking about the movement of stuff across national borders, all kinds of stuff. Things, services, money, people, ideas. Up until, say, the late 1700s, early 1800s, the world economically didn't really grow that quickly. It was pretty flat. And then suddenly, something happened. And we have this great surge in the quality of life of people in Western Europe and North America. Their lives got remarkably better over the next century or so. Not much happened in the rest of the world. That was that chapter. Then it changes in globalization 2.0, which brings us to something called the elephant chart. It's from an economist named Branko Milanovic. And it tells us a whole lot about global inequality and who the winners and losers have been since the late 80s. So it's shaped like an elephant, and there are 3 dramatic points on this elephant chart. So let's look at point A, which is the top of the elephant head. And this is the story of the emerging economies. This is the rising middle class, mostly in Asia. You might be in India or China and you've left the farm for the city. You have electricity, refrigeration, better income, you live longer, you live better. Now let's look down at point B, the working class in Japan, in Germany, and the United States. The lower half of the rich countries, they still make a fair amount of money compared to the rest of the world, but their incomes have not improved. So they're the relative losers of the last generation. If you're at point B looking over your shoulder at all this progress at point A, you're not happy about that. You might think that your losses have come at the expense of point A, of these emerging economies, of these foreigners, of these immigrants. And that helps us understand the rise of these politicians who want to raise the drawbridges in the Netherlands and France and the United States.
Build that wall! Build that wall!
Right-wing populism. And then there's point C, right? That is the global 1%. Their incomes have surged, so those are the plutocrats, right? Those are the richest in the world. And if you look at who's looking up at point C is people in those same countries that are down at point B. This helps us understand the angst at the super rich, Occupy Wall Street, the Bernie Sanders campaign.
There has been a huge redistribution of wealth to the top 1%.
This is populism on the left, left-wing populism. The experts have been warning us for decades that if you don't do anything about this distribution issue, about this inequality, something's bound to happen. Well, you know what? Politically, something is happening.
Things will remain cool for the cities on the coast, but temps are rising inland. Erin Calandra has more in tonight's forecast.
Things are pretty quiet around here. We don't see any wet weather here at all on our satellite and radar. So plenty of sunshine out there. It's going to stay nice and dry. Taking a look at the bigger picture, we're still seeing some pop-up thunderstorms in parts of Arizona, like Flagstaff, for example. Could see a couple showers today. Cloudy conditions as well. But San Diego, Los Angeles, well, we are nice and dry. For tonight, 64 degrees for our overnight low. That's about average. Right around where we should be. Becoming cloudy as the night progresses. Those clouds, of course, will stick around in the morning and then burn off, and we'll have plenty of sunshine throughout the day. Very typical pattern. So for Oceanside tonight, 63, Poway 59, Alpine 53 for our overnight low. In the mountains here in Mount Laguna, 51, Borrego Springs, 70, and really anyone could see some clouds passing through, but it's going to remain dry for everyone. Tomorrow, Oceanside, 74 degrees, San Diego, 74, Poway, 81 degrees. As we move it further to the east in the deserts, 98 degrees, so that's a nice break because it has been in the triple digits here for quite some time. Mount Laguna, 71, and Alpine sitting right at 80 degrees with plenty of sunshine for everyone. Here we are along the coast, our 5-day forecast. Look at those temperatures, very comfortable. We're cruising right through the mid-70s every single day. Clouds in the morning and then sunshine throughout the day. So beautiful conditions here. Inland, it's a bit warmer. We're in the 80s, very comfortable temperatures. And then also some low clouds in the morning, breaking up for some sunshine. The weekend, though, it's going to be beautiful, lots of sunshine. So make sure you grab the shades before you head out the door. In the mountains, we're in the 70s on Saturday and Sunday. We're in the upper 70s the rest of the week. We're climbing the ladder there. Temperatures very comfortable with lots of sunshine. And in the deserts, we are still in the triple digits much of the week. So for today and also tomorrow, we're in the 90s, but then we're right back up to the hundreds with plenty of sun. Just make sure you're drinking lots of water out there. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
Climate change isn't new, so why now are so many people focusing on it? NPR's Christopher Joyce says it has a lot to do with predictability.
First, the climate has always changed, but it is changing faster than before. Temperature records that go back for many decades show a clear upward trend. The last 20 years have included some of the hottest on record. As a result, the oceans are rising, and we can measure that. We know that water expands when it gets hotter, and ice that's sitting on land is also melting and pouring into the oceans. Hurricane Sandy in 2012 is an example of the dangers of rising ocean waters. A relatively small storm made catastrophic from rising water. And these changes are exactly what climate scientists predicted when they first noticed that we're pumping more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Those gases trap heat, and sooner or later, they said, it will get warmer. And that's changing the weather. Now, you can't blame every big storm or heat wave on climate change, but the overwhelming majority of climate scientists agree that a warmer world means different weather, maybe way different. You know, we live in a society that depends on predictability. If we make the weather unpredictable, more people are going to suffer from flooding, heat waves, more intense storms. So we've already seen the world's average temperature rise about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 1800s. And there's more warming already baked into the atmosphere that we can expect to see in coming decades. But it's not too late to keep a lid on warming. It won't be easy, and it won't be cheap. But at least we know the solution. Change the way we use energy and the land. The good news is it's already happening.
Strong reading skills at an early age can lead to academic success down the road. A national program wants to set kids in public housing down that path. KPBS City Heights reporter Taryn Minto tells us it starts with a good book.
A Tale of Caribbean Life, a Dr. Seuss classic in English and Spanish. These are among the titles that were specifically curated for San Diego kids as part of the Book Rich Environments Initiative. It's a collaboration of several organizations and government agencies to link public housing authorities with libraries in about 30 communities across the U.S. City of San Diego Public Library Systems, Emily Derry, says the goal is to help low-income families expand their book collections and introduce them to the programs libraries offer.
Story times and summer programs that we have, like the kindergarten boot camps and our Do Your Homework at the Library program. So really getting kids interested or knowledgeable about the library at a young age and their parents at a young age so that they can become lifelong library users.
Books will be distributed to pre-selected families at 3 San Diego libraries, including in City Heights. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.